Roy's fingers slammed the throttle forward, rocketing his ship ahead as alien guns unleashed hellfire, the Terran pilot refusing to let those Illyrian shitbirds beat humans again. Just hours earlier, Admiral Vance had summoned Roy to an emergency briefing at Terran Defense Force HQ. The gruff commander, a cybernetic eyepiece glinting, cut straight to the point. "The squids are tired of losing. They've challenged us to a winner-take-all starship race, putting the Orion hyperspace lane up as the prize." Roy leaned forward. "No way we're letting tentacle faces control that lane. They'll use it to smuggle weapons and hit our supply lines. Which is why you're going to win this race. You're the best unorthodox pilot we've got. But I won't lie, the Illyrians have superior engines. It's going to take guts, grit, and a hell of a lot of crazy flying through asteroid belts and hostile sectors to beat them to that finish line. You fail, we lose the war. Humanity enslaved or extinct." As Roy exited, his rival Zane blocked his path with a sneer. "Hope you've got a comfy cell picked out for when the squids make you their prison bitch after they win." Roy shouldered past. "Fuck you, Zane. And fuck the Illyrians. They want to make this race high stakes, I'll give 'em high stakes. I'll fly like a bat out of hell, fight like a cornered Wolverine, and show them that when it comes to owning the finish line, never bet against the human race." Roy's starfighter dropped out of hyperspace, the swirling blue tunnel of FTL travel giving way to a dazzling sight, the Illyrian homeworld. Towering crystalline spires stretched into the sky, glinting in the light of the planet's twin suns. Sleek anti-grav vehicles zipped between the buildings, while starships of all sizes and configurations darted in and out of the bustling spaceport. As Roy maneuvered his ship towards the designated landing pad, he couldn't help but marvel at the advanced technology on display. The Illyrians were light years ahead of humanity in terms of scientific progress, but that didn't mean they were invincible. Roy was determined to prove that human guts and ingenuity could still come out on top. After touching down, Roy disembarked from his ship and was immediately greeted by a tall, muscular Illyrian with golden skin and piercing amber eyes. "Greetings, human. I am Taurus, your assigned liaison for the duration of the Galactic Grand Prix. Please, follow me." Roy fell into step beside Taurus as they navigated through the crowded spaceport. Aliens of all shapes and sizes bustled about, some casting curious glances in Roy's direction. It was clear that humans were a rare sight on this world. Taurus led Roy to a large dome-shaped building at the center of the spaceport. "This is the registration center for the Grand Prix. Here, you will meet your fellow competitors and learn more about the race itself." As they entered the building, Roy found himself in a vast atrium filled with holographic displays and high-tech gadgetry. In the center of the room stood a group of aliens, each one more exotic and intimidating than the last. Taurus gestured towards a hulking reptilian creature, with razor-sharp claws and a mouthful of jagged teeth. "That is Zorax, the reigning champion of the Grand Prix. He's known for his ruthless tactics on the racetrack. I'd advise you to steer clear of him." Roy sized up his competition, his jaw clenching with determination. He wasn't about to let some overgrown lizard intimidate him. "I'll keep that in mind." As Roy mingled with the other racers, he learned more about the treacherous course that lay ahead. The race would span multiple star systems, weaving through asteroid fields and unstable wormholes. The final stretch would take them through the heart of a dying supernova, a gauntlet that had claimed the lives of countless pilots in the past. But the dangers of the race were the least of Roy's worries. As he made his way to the hangar where his ship, the Prometheus, was being stored, he discovered a group of technicians clustered around the vessel, looks of concern etched on their faces. "What's going on here?" Roy demanded, pushing his way through the crowd. One of the technicians, a spindly creature with bulbous eyes, turned to face him. "We found something during our pre-race inspection. Someone's tampered with your engines. If you had tried to push them to full throttle, the whole ship would have torn itself apart." Roy's blood ran cold. Sabotage. One of his rivals was trying to take him out of the race before it even began. His mind immediately went to Zorax. The Illyrian champion would stop at nothing to secure another victory. But Roy wasn't about to let this setback derail his mission. He rolled up his sleeves and set to work alongside the technicians, determined to repair the damage and root out the saboteur. He would need to be extra vigilant going forward. In a race with stakes this high, trust was a luxury he could not afford. As the countdown to the start of the Grand Prix ticked ever closer, Roy could feel the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders, but he refused to buckle under the pressure. He would race like hell, fight tooth and nail, and show the Illyrians and every other species out there what humanity was made of. Failure was not an option. Roy gripped the controls of the Prometheus, his knuckles bone-white as he realized the true magnitude of the sabotage. This wasn't just about winning a race anymore. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. He turned to Taurus, the Illyrian's amber eyes narrowing with determination. "We need to get to the bottom of this. Someone's trying to rig the race, and I've got a feeling it goes deeper than just a few jealous rivals." Taurus nodded, his muscular frame tense. "I agree. Let's start by questioning the other racers, see if anyone's noticed anything suspicious." They moved through the hangar, Roy's eyes scanning the competition. Most of the aliens seemed focused on their own ships, but a few cast wary glances in his direction. He approached an insectoid racer, its compound eyes glittering. The alien chittered, shaking its head. "No, human, but there have been whispers of a group called the Void Collective. They seek to sow chaos and disrupt the balance of power. Be careful who you trust." Roy and Taurus exchanged a look. This was bigger than they'd thought. They spent the next few hours questioning racers and gathering what evidence they could. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. The Void Collective was manipulating events behind the scenes, hoping to destabilize the galaxy by controlling the outcome of the Grand Prix. Roy slammed his fist against the wall. "We can't let them get away with this. Winning this race isn't just about proving humanity's worth anymore. It's about stopping these bastards before they plunge the galaxy into war." Taurus placed a hand on Roy's shoulder. "And we will, my friend, together." The day of the race dawned, and Roy felt a surge of adrenaline as he strapped himself into the Prometheus's cockpit. He knew Zorax would be gunning for him, determined to keep his title at any cost. But Roy was ready. He'd faced down the saboteurs, uncovered their plot. Now it was time to show the galaxy what one human could do. The first leg of the race was a treacherous asteroid field, jagged rocks hurtling through space at breakneck speeds. Roy wove the Prometheus through the deadly obstacle course, his reflexes lightning fast as he dodged and rolled. Zorax's ship loomed in his rear view, the Illyrian champion's weapons glowing as he locked onto Roy's engines. Roy juked hard to port, feeling the heat of the plasma blast singe his shields. Zorax was playing dirty, just as Roy had expected. But two could play at that game. Roy spotted a narrow gap between two tumbling asteroids, barely wide enough for his ship to fit through. It was a crazy move, one that could easily end in a fiery explosion. But it was the only way to shake Zorax. Roy gritted his teeth and punched the throttle, the Prometheus leaping forward. The asteroids loomed on either side, filling his view screen. He held his breath, bracing for impact. And then he was through, the asteroids spinning away behind him. Zorax's ship, too large to follow, was forced to veer off, buying Roy precious seconds. As the Prometheus rocketed out of the asteroid field, Roy caught sight of another racer pulling up alongside him. The sleek Illyrian craft bore the markings of House Sarin, one of the most influential families in the galaxy. Its pilot was a female, her lilac skin and silver hair striking even through the cockpit glass. "Impressive flying, human," her voice crackled over the comm. "I am Arya of House Sarin. It seems we have a common enemy in the Void Collective." Roy raised an eyebrow. An ally among the Illyrians was the last thing he'd expected. But if Arya was sincere, he'd be a fool to turn her away. "The enemy of my enemy and all that, eh? All right, Arya, let's show these Void bastards what we're made of." The two ships blasted off together, streaking towards the distant stars and the next leg of the race. Roy knew the road ahead would be long and perilous, but with Taurus and Arya at his side, he was ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy threw his way. As the second stage of the Grand Prix began, the racers approached the gaping maw of the wormhole, its swirling vortex of energy casting an eerie glow across their ships. Roy gripped the Prometheus's controls, his heart pounding as he prepared to navigate the treacherous passage. The moment they entered the wormhole, chaos erupted. The unstable energy currents tossed the ships about like leaves in a storm, alarms blaring as pilots struggled to maintain control. Roy gritted his teeth, fighting against the turbulence. Suddenly, a blinding flash illuminated the wormhole's interior as one of the racers collided with an energy surge, their ship disintegrating in a burst of flame. Roy had no time to react as another racer, caught in the explosion's shockwave, spun wildly out of control and slammed into the Prometheus's shields. Roy's ship shuddered under the impact, but he refused to panic. Trusting his instincts and the Prometheus's advanced sensors, he wove through the wormhole's twisted corridors, evading the deadly energy surges and the wreckage of fallen ships. After what felt like an eternity, the Prometheus emerged from the wormhole battered but intact. Roy found himself in a strange, alien star system, its planets and moons unlike anything he had ever seen. As he scanned his surroundings, a flicker of movement caught his eye. A group of luminous beings, their forms composed of pure energy, materialized before him. Their voices echoed in Roy's mind, offering him a tantalizing proposition. Human, we sense your desire for victory. Accept our aid, and we shall grant you the power to triumph over your foes. Roy hesitated, torn between his competitive spirit and his moral code. The being's offer was tempting, but something deep within him recoiled at the thought of winning through outside intervention. He had come this far on his own merits, and he would see the race through to the end no matter the cost. The energy being seemed to regard him with a mix of surprise and respect. Very well, human. May your courage and determination guide you to success. With that they vanished, leaving Roy alone among the stars. As he plotted his course through the uncharted system, Roy's comm crackled to life. Taurus's voice filled the cockpit, urgent and strained. Roy, we've uncovered the truth about the Void Collective. They're not just a rogue faction. They're being backed by a corrupt Illyrian official named Zoran. He's been manipulating the Grand Prix from the start, hoping to destabilize the Galactic Order. Arya chimed in, her tone grim. Zoran has planted operatives among the racers. We suspect Zorax is one of them. You need to be on your guard. Roy absorbed the information, a newfound sense of purpose surging through him. This race was no longer just about proving humanity's worth. It was about protecting the very fabric of galactic peace. He had to win, not just for himself, but for the sake of countless lives across the stars. As the final leg of the Grand Prix loomed on the horizon, Roy pushed the Prometheus to its limits, determined to confront Zorax and put an end to the Void Collective's schemes. The two ships raced neck and neck, their engines roaring as they hurtled through the void. Roy knew that the coming battle would test him like never before, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The final leg of the race plunged the pilots into the heart of a collapsing supernova. Intense gravitational forces tugged at their ships, threatening to rip them apart. Deadly radiation flooded their sensors, while unpredictable solar flares burst around them like cosmic fireworks. Roy and Zorax jockeyed for position, their ships mere inches apart as they navigated the stellar maelstrom. Zorax's craft edged ahead, its superior engines giving him the advantage, but as he pulled away, a massive energy surge erupted from the dying star's core. The blast slammed into Zorax's ship, sending it spinning wildly out of control. The Illyrian champion's reply was lost in a burst of static. His ship tumbled end over end, vanishing into the supernova's blinding light. Roy didn't hesitate. He wrenched the Prometheus's controls hard to port, breaking formation and diving after Zorax. The human pilot gritted his teeth as the intense gravitational forces threatened to crush him. Warnings blared across his displays, his ship groaning under the strain. But he pushed forward, closing the gap between him and Zorax meter by agonizing meter. The heat was unbearable, the radiation levels lethal. Roy's vision blurred, his head pounding. But he refused to give up. With a final, desperate surge of power, Roy activated the Prometheus's advanced tractor beam. The focused energy lanced out, locking onto Zorax's stricken vessel. Roy hauled back on the controls, his muscles screaming as he fought against the supernova's pull. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, Zorax's ship began to move, dragged back from the brink by Roy's unyielding grip. The two craft rocketed away from the supernova's deadly core, the tractor beam straining to maintain its hold. But even as they cleared the danger zone, Roy knew their troubles were far from over. Intense radiation had taken its toll on both ships, frying circuits and melting hull plates. The Prometheus shuddered, its lights flickering as main power failed. Zorax's vessel fared no better, leaking atmosphere and drifting on auxiliary thrusters. "Looks like we're in this together now," Roy said, his voice strained. "Both our ships are barely holding together. We need to work together if we're going to survive this." Zorax's reply crackled over the damaged comm system. "I never thought I'd say this to a human, but you saved my life. I owe you a debt." The two pilots, former rivals turned unlikely allies, limped their battered ships through the supernova's treacherous plasma storms and gravitational anomalies. Roy's hands flew over the Prometheus controls, coaxing every last ounce of power from the damaged systems. Zorax matched his efforts, his skills as a pilot shining through even in the face of overwhelming odds. Suddenly, a distress call burst over the comm, filled with static and barely intelligible. "Taurus area, Void Collective, attack, control center, hyperspace lane, danger." Roy's blood ran cold. He exchanged a quick glance with Zorax over the viewscreen, seeing his own fears mirrored in the Illyrian's eyes. The Void Collective had made their move, the Galactic Grand Prix, the hyperspace lane, the entire galaxy. It was all at risk. "We have to stop them," Roy said, his voice filled with a new determination. "But our ships are in no shape for a fight." Zorax was silent for a moment, his gaze distant. Then slowly a fierce grin spread across his face. "The supernova. We can use its energy to slingshot us towards the finish line. One last boost to get us there in time." The two pilots worked frantically, rerouting power and plotting vectors. They had one shot at this, one chance to harness the immense power of the exploding star. If they timed it wrong, if they miscalculated by even a fraction. But there was no time for doubts. Roy gripped the controls, his gaze locked on the swirling maelstrom of the supernova. Beside him, Zorax mirrored his stance, his claws flexing over the throttle. "On my mark," Roy said, his voice steady. 3, 2, 1, now!" As one, the two ships plunged toward the supernova's heart, their engines screaming. Gravitational forces tore at them, threatening to shred their hulls. But they held course, aiming for the precise point where the star's immense energy could be harnessed. For a breathless moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, with a blinding flash and a bone-jarring jolt, the supernova's power surged through their ships. The Prometheus and Zorax's racer leapt forward, riding the crest of the shockwave like leaves caught in a hurricane. Faster and faster they flew, the supernova's dying light fading behind them as they hurtled towards the distant finish line. Roy's heart hammered in his chest, adrenaline surging through his veins. This was it, the final push. Everything they'd fought for, all the sacrifices they'd made, it all came down to this. In the distance, the Galactic Grand Prix Control Center loomed, its gleaming spires now marred by the scars of battle. The Void Collective's ships swarmed around it, a dark tide threatening to engulf all that stood in their way. But they hadn't counted on Roy and Zorax, the two pilots forged by the crucible of the race into something stronger than either could have imagined, rocketed towards the fray, their ships glowing with the supernova's residual energy. They were battered, they were bruised, but they were far from beaten, and as they plunged into the heart of the battle, lasers blazing and engines roaring, they carried with them the hopes and dreams of an entire galaxy. The final confrontation had begun, and Roy knew with a certainty that blazed brighter than any star that he would stop at nothing to see it through to the end. The supernova's hellish glow filled the Prometheus's viewports, as Roy and Zorax raced towards the finish line, their battered ship straining with every parsec. Suddenly, Taurus's voice crackled over the comm, urgent and strained. "Roy, Zorax, the Void Collective has seized control of the race's central computer. They can manipulate the outcome, even destroy ships remotely. You have to stop them." Roy's mind raced, a desperate plan taking shape. He turned to Zorax, meeting the Illyrian's steely gaze. "I need to hack the system, regain control, but it means a spacewalk, direct interface with the Prometheus's AI." Zorax nodded grimly. "I'll pilot. You're the best chance we have. Go." Roy suited up, mag boots clanking against the hull as he made his way to the external port. The supernova's radiation battered him, gravity threatening to tear him away into oblivion. Gritting his teeth, he connected to the port, fingers flying across the interface. A solar flare erupted, slamming into the ship. Roy's grip nearly faltered, the vortex yawning beneath him. With a roar of defiance, he clung on, completing the interface. The Prometheus's AI surged to life around him, a digital landscape of swirling code. Roy plunged in, locking into a vicious cyber duel with the Void Collective's hackers. Zorax jinked and whirled, evading the treacherous plasma storms. Taurus's voice guided them, a lifeline through the chaos. Roy's consciousness merged with the AI, clashing with the enemy hackers on a virtual battlefield. Firewalls shattered, viruses lunged and recoiled. Roy rolled and struck, a digital warrior battling for the galaxy's fate. Zorax shot a worried glance at the airlock. The supernova loomed, a monstrous maw poised to devour them. The ship bucked and heaved, alarms screaming. Inside the AI, Roy smashed through the final defenses, seizing control. With a thought, he broadcast the truth of the Void Collective's treachery across every comm channel. A galaxy gasped in shock as the veil of secrecy burned away. Roy disengaged from the AI, staggering back into the airlock. Zorax hauled him inside, sealing the hatch against the supernova's fury. On the view screens, the Void Collective's ships faltered and scattered, their schemes laid bare. The Illyrian command fleet pounced, tearing into the disarrayed foe. Roy and Zorax shared an exhausted grin, triumph flickering in their eyes. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd saved the race, saved the galaxy. Roy's eyes widened in horrified recognition. He'd seen this ship before in the deepest files of the Terran intelligence network. The Devourer, an ancient malevolent entity that consumed entire stars and the races that orbited them. The Prometheus and Zorax's racer hurtled forwards, the finish line a distant hope against this new terrifying foe. The Devourer's weapons punctured the void, a storm of fire and death reaching out to smite all in its path. Just as victory seemed within grasp, Vance's image erupted across the view screen. The Admiral's face was twisted in a sneer, eyes glinting with malice. "You disappoint me, Roy. I had such high hopes for you." Roy snarled, fingers flying across the interface. "It's over, Vance. I know the truth. You're finished." But Vance only laughed, a sound like grinding metal. The view screen shifted, revealing Arya bound and gagged, a gun pressed to her temple. "Surrender control, Roy, or watch your precious Illyrian die." Roy froze, heart hammering against his ribs. Arya's eyes met his, fierce and defiant even in the face of death. The weight of a galaxy's fate pressed down on him, duty and desire locked in a battle as ancient as the stars themselves. With a shuddering breath, Roy lowered his hands from the interface. "All right, Vance, you win, releasing control now." Vance's face split in a triumphant grin as the system fell under his sway once more. But even as Roy sagged in apparent defeat, his fingers moved in a blur, transmitting the damning evidence to Taurus on a hidden frequency. Vance's laughter filled the cockpit, the Admiral's image looming large. "Foolish boy, did you really think you could outplay me? I've won. The galaxy is—" His words cut off in a choking gasp as Zorax appeared on the screen behind him. The Illyrian's claws locked around Vance's throat. Arya stood at his side, freed from her bonds, eyes blazing with righteous fury. Zorax's voice was a growl of barely contained rage. "Treachery has a price, Admiral, and the Illyrian Empire always collects its debts." Roy watched, numb with relief and exhaustion, as Zorax and Arya subdued Vance and his guards. The Admiral's screams of rage and denial echoed through the ship, a fitting requiem for a shattered conspiracy. The Prometheus and Zorax's racer shot towards the finish line, engines straining, hulls shaking. Roy gripped the controls, knuckles bone-white, eyes locked on the final stretch. Suddenly alarms blared across the cockpit. Proximity warnings flashed red. Roy's heart pounded. The invisible traps littered the racecourse ahead, waiting to ensnare them in crushing gravitational fields. One wrong move, and they'd be torn apart. He wrenched the controls, the Prometheus responding like an extension of his will. The ship jinked and wove, dancing a hair's breadth from oblivion. Beside him, Zorax matched his moves, the two pilots locked in a deadly synchronicity. Sweat beaded Roy's brow as he whipped through mine after mine, the ship bucking and jolting. Alarms screamed, the hull groaning under the strain. Suddenly a pattern emerged in the chaos. The mines weren't random, they were arranged in a sequence he could use. "Zorax!" Roy shouted over the comm. "I've got an idea. If we trigger the mines in a specific order, the blast wave could propel us forward, create a temporary wormhole." "A wormhole?" Zorax's voice was strained but intrigued. "Risky, I like it." "On my mark." Roy's fingers flew over the controls, plotting vectors, energy levels. 3, 2, 1, mark. In perfect unison, the Prometheus and Zorax's racer fired, energy lancing out. The first mine detonated, then the next, then the next. A chain reaction, a cascading symphony of destruction. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then reality tore open with a deafening roar. A swirling maelstrom of energy erupted before them, a gateway to victory. "Full throttle now!" Roy yelled, slamming the accelerator. Roy's ship shuddered, alarms wailing, systems redlining. He ignored it all, his focus absolute. One final push, one last burst of speed. The finish line filled his view screen, a shining beacon of hope and triumph. He could feel the weight of history, the hopes of humanity, the fate of the galaxy, all converging on this single, shining moment. With a thunderous roar, the Prometheus surged forward, crossing the line a quantum fraction ahead of Zorax. An instant of breathless silence, then the calm erupted in a cacophony of cheers and celebrations. Roy sagged back in his chair, heart hammering, adrenaline singing. They'd done it. Against all odds, against all enemies, they'd won. Humanity and Illyrians united in victory. A new chapter for the galaxy, written in the fire of a dying star, and the audacity of two pilots who dared to defy fate. But even as the cheers washed over him, Roy knew their battle was far from over. The Devourer still lurked in the void, a malevolent force waiting to consume them all. And somewhere out there, the remnants of the Void Collective plotted their revenge, their schemes far from foiled. A smile tugged at Roy's lips, fierce and determined. Let them come. He'd faced down saboteurs, traitors, and the fury of a supernova. He'd forged bonds across the stars, found allies in the most unexpected places. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he'd meet them head-on with all the grit and daring of the human spirit. For now, though, there was a victory to savor, a galaxy to reshape. Roy reached for the comm, ready to hail Zorax, to begin the hard work of building a new era of peace and cooperation. As the Prometheus and Zorax's racer glided into the landing bay, the roar of the gathered crowd hit Roy like a physical wall. Beings from 100 worlds cheered and waved, their voices mingling in a cacophony of jubilation. Roy stepped out of his ship, legs unsteady after the intense race. Zorax emerged beside him, his golden skin gleaming under the bright lights. In a moment that would be remembered for generations, Zorax turned to Roy and extended his hand. "Well flown, human. You showed skill and courage out there. I am honored to have raced beside you." Roy clasped the Illyrian's hand, a grin splitting his face. "The honor was mine, Zorax. We made a hell of a team out there." As the two pilots raised their joined hands in triumph, The crowd erupted in fresh cheers. Species that had been at odds for centuries now stood side by side, united in their celebration of this historic moment. But even as the applause washed over them, Taurus and Arya pushed through the throng, their expressions grim. They pulled Roy and Zorax aside, huddling close to be heard over the din. "We found something in the data you transmitted," Arya said, her voice tight. "Vance wasn't working alone. There are others in the Terran Defense Force, high-ranking officials, who were part of his conspiracy." Roy felt like he'd been punched in the gut. The betrayal cut deep, a hot blade of anger and confusion. But why? Why would they turn against their own people? "Power," Taurus rumbled. "The promise of control over the hyperspace lanes, the ability to dictate terms to the rest of the galaxy. They were willing to sacrifice anything, even peace, for that kind of influence." Zorax's eyes narrowed. "This cannot stand. The Illyrian people will not abide such treachery. There must be consequences." "And there will be," a new voice cut in. The group turned to see a tall, regal figure approaching, flanked by a retinue of aides and guards. Roy recognized him instantly, the Illyrian Prime Minister, leader of the Galactic Council. "You have uncovered a grave threat to the stability of our galaxy," the Prime Minister said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "The Council must be convened immediately. We will get to the bottom of this conspiracy and root out all those responsible." Roy squared his shoulders, the mantle of responsibility settling heavily upon him. "I'll testify. I'll tell them everything I know, everything we've discovered. The truth has to come out, no matter the cost." The Prime Minister nodded, approval glinting in his amber eyes. "Well said, Roy Stiles. Your courage does credit to your species. Come, the Council awaits." The heart of the Galactic Council was a vast circular chamber, its walls lined with the banners of 1,000 worlds. Representatives from every corner of known space filled the tiered seats, their faces a mosaic of color and form. At the center of the room, Roy stood alongside Zorax, Taurus, and Arya. They faced the assembled council, the weight of their evidence heavy in the air. Roy took a deep breath and stepped forward. He laid out the facts, the trail of deceit that led from the sabotage of his ship to the betrayal at the heart of the Terran Defense Force. With each revelation, the chamber grew more restless, the anger and disbelief palpable. Roy blinked, taken aback by the offer. He glanced at his friends, Zorax, Taurus, Arya, seeing the encouragement in their eyes. The path ahead was uncertain, the challenges daunting. But he knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that this was his calling. A chance to make a real difference, to shape the future of the galaxy. He turned back to the Prime Minister, his jaw set with determination. "I accept, Your Excellency. I pledge to do everything in my power to foster peace and unity between our peoples, to ensure that the sacrifices we've made were not in vain." The Prime Minister clasped Roy's shoulder, a smile creasing his aged face. "The Illyrian people are grateful, Roy Stiles. Together, we will build a galaxy worthy of the trust placed in us." As Roy left the council chamber, a sense of purpose burned bright within him. The Galactic Grand Prix had been a crucible, testing him in ways he'd never imagined, but it had also forged unbreakable bonds, shown him the true strength that lay in unity and understanding. He knew the road ahead would be long, the battles hard-fought. The forces of division and greed would not yield easily. But with his friends at his side, with the weight of the galaxy's hopes on his shoulders, Roy felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. This was just the beginning, the first steps on a journey that would define the course of history. And Roy Stiles, the humble human pilot who had risen to the challenge, would be at the forefront, leading the charge toward a brighter tomorrow. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.